Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yamunatira Vanachare Yamunatira Vanachare Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Gopi Jana Balava Giri Bharadhare Gopi Jana Balava Giri Bharadhare Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yamunatira Vanachare Yamunatira Vanachare Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Jai Prabhupada Jai Prabhupada Jai Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jai Prabhupada Jai Prabhupada Jai Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jai Jai Prabhupada 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 Jai Jai Prabhupada 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 Jai Vishnupad Paramahangsa Parafrajacharyas Tadasaswad His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki, ISKCON's founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada ki, Srila Prabhupada lilamrta ki, Shri Shri Radha Radhanath ki, Shri Giri Govardhan ki, Shri Caitanya Mahaprabhu ki, Sankirtan Yagya ki, Go Premanande. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, devotees, we're reading from Srila Prabhupada Lilamrta, Volume 3, Chapter 1. Swami invites the hippies. And just interestingly enough, well, we're reading from broadcasting Prabhupada Lilamrta every night, Monday to Friday, generally. And we read this chapter just a week or maximum 2 weeks ago. It's an interesting chapter, and Srila Prabhupada is just landing right now, January the 16th, 1967, landing in San Francisco from New York. And one might wonder, if one sort of understands a little bit about America, why from New York to San Francisco? Because New York, of course, is the biggest city in America and one of the biggest in the world still. San Francisco is not so big. It's nothing like the size of New York. Even Los Angeles, which is not far from San Francisco, they're both in the state of California and along the coast. Los Angeles, which is the second biggest in America, is much bigger than San Francisco. So why San Francisco? I mean, well, of course, historically, Srila Prabhupada started the movement in New York, and he was there for quite some time. He was there from, September 65, I think, something like that, until right now, January 1967, so it's about almost a year and a half, and the last, what would it be, through the northern summer, so it might be like May or June or something, the last approximately 6 months, Prabhupada's movement has really been taking off. And a group of dedicated young people has appeared. Prabhupada's given initiation to, I'm not sure how many, but it may well have been about 30 or so. in New York. And they're all really, most of them at least, are really trying to take it very seriously and develop the movement and trying to appreciate Prabhupada. So Mukunda, who had also become a devotee in New York, and he was in the second group of devotees to be initiated, so he was really pretty much from the beginning. But he went to California for some reason. He and his wife, Prabhupada married them, Janaki. They went to California, and Mukunda was very inspired by Srila Prabhupada and Krishna consciousness in general, but in a very personal way with Srila Prabhupada. And whoever he would meet, and he had friends here and there across the country, he would tell them about Prabhupada and Krishna consciousness, kind of in that order. So he and his wife met Shamsunda, who was Sam at the time, and his girlfriend, who is Malati Devi Dasi, and Roger Seagull, who became Guru Das, and Yamuna was Joan. Was she Joan? Yeah, okay. Sorry. Yeah. And so they all got interested. And Mukunda would write to Prabhupada fairly regularly, and they ended up in San Francisco. And San Francisco was the capital of the world hippie movement. There was also, in the area where Prabhupada was preaching in New York, there was a hippie area, the Lower East Side, where 26 Second Avenue, the first temple was and still is. That was in the center of the New York hippie area. But the New York hippie area was much smaller, and the number of hippies was much smaller than San Francisco. And the hippies in New York, well, let's put it this way, the hippies in San Francisco were much more hippies than the hippies. They were hippies in New York. And to the point that San Francisco was just a huge center of some hundreds of thousands of hippies who were, like in New York, practically all the young sort of hippie devotees, practically all of them had flats to live in. I think all of them did, actually. They were renting flats. A number of them had jobs. And those who didn't have jobs, they had some financial means. They were not living in the streets. But in San Francisco, so many of these young people were just living in the streets and just living on drugs. Anyway, we will read and you'll see. San Francisco was really extreme. Really extreme. And it's one of the most, the next few chapters are amongst the most colorful in the whole Prabhupada lilamrta. So, Prabhupada's just landing right now, San Francisco. Mukunda's there with approximately 50 hippies, including Allen Ginsberg is there, the famous poet, extremely famous actually, from even before, because he was from a somewhat older generation, before the hippies were the beatniks, and they were a version of hippies. And Allen Ginsberg was very famous in America amongst the whole population, but he had really taken a liking to Prabhupada. In New York, he would come from time to time and visit Prabhupada. He donated money, $200, to help Prabhupada get his visa or his residency card, green card. He donated at least one, I think, 2 harmoniums. He had been in India and picked up the chanting of Hare Krishna there in India. Okay, so let's see how things unfold. January the 16th, 1967, as the United Airlines jet descended on the San Francisco Bay Area, Srila Prabhupada turned to his disciple Ranchor and said, "The buildings look like matchboxes. Just imagine how it looks from Krishna's viewpoint." Srila Prabhupada was 71 years old, and this had been his first air trip. Ranchor, 19, and dressed in a suit and tie, was supposed to be Srila Prabhupada's secretary. He was a new disciple, but had raised some money and had asked to fly to San Francisco with Prabhupada. During the trip, Srila Prabhupada had spoken little. He had been chanting, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. His right hand in his cloth bead bag, he had been fingering one bead after another as he chanted silently to himself. When the plane had first risen over New York City, he had looked out the window at the buildings growing smaller and smaller. Then the plane had entered the clouds, which to Prabhupada had appeared like an ocean in the sky. He had been bothered by pressure blocking his ears and had mentioned it. Otherwise he hadn't said much, but had only chanted Krishna's names over and over. Now, as the plane began its descent, he continued to chant, his voice slightly audible, Krishna, Krishna, Krishna. And he looked out the window at the vista of thousands of matchbox houses and streets, stretching in charted patterns in every direction. When the announcement for United Airlines Flight 21 from New York came over the public address system, the group of about 50 hippies gathered closer together in anticipation. For a moment they appeared almost apprehensive, unsure of what to expect or what the Swami would be like. Roger Seagull, so he becomes Guru Das, who is still an active devotee. Anyway, he's still an active devotee. We were quite an assorted lot, even for the San Francisco airport. Mukunda was wearing a Merlin the Magician robe with paisley squares all around. Sam, who became Shamsunda, was wearing a Moroccan sheep robe with a hood. He even smelled like a sheep. And I was wearing a sort of blue, homemade Japanese samurai robe with small white dots. Long strings of beads were everywhere. Buckskins, boots, army fatigues, people wearing small round sunglasses, because that was very in those days. Round glasses, from John Lennon mainly. The whole phantasmagoria of San Francisco at its height. And it's interesting to note, Mukunda's an initiated devotee and has been for, some months, definitely. It might be 6 months or something like that. But he's wearing a Merlin the Magician robe and not dhoti and kurta and tilak. And it'll be mentioned as we go. He has long hair and a beard. None of the devotees had shaved heads. None of them, including in New York, even after some months of being initiated and really being involved, none of them wore dhotis and kurtas. Prabhupada was very sort of gentle in how he introduced the culture, the cultural aspect. Only a few people in the crowd knew Swamiji, Mukunda and his wife Janaki, Ravindra Swarup, Roy Ram, all from New York. And Allen Ginsberg was there. A few days before, Allen had been one of the leaders of the Human Be-In in Golden Gate Park, where over 200,000 had come together, a gathering of the tribes for a joyful powwow and peace dance. This is the hippie thing. Today, Allen was on hand to greet Swami Bhaktivedanta, whom he had met and chanted with several months before on New York's Lower East Side. Swamiji would be pleased, Mukunda reminded everyone, if they were all chanting Hare Krishna when he came through the gate. They were already familiar with the Hare Krishna mantra. They'd heard about the Swamis chanting in the park in New York, or they had seen the article about Swamiji and the chanting in the local underground paper, the Oracle. Earlier today, they had gathered in Golden Gate Park, most of them responding to a flyer Mukunda had distributed, and had chanted there for more than an hour before coming to the airport in a caravan of cars. Now many of them, also in response to Mukunda's flyer, stood with incense and flowers in their hands. As the disembarking passengers entered the terminal gate and walked up the ramp, they looked in amazement at the reception party of flower-bearing chanters. The chanters, however, gazed past these ordinary tired-looking travelers, searching for that special person who was supposed to be on the plane. Suddenly, strolling toward them was the Swami, golden-complexioned, dressed in bright saffron robes. Prabhupada had heard the chanting even before he had entered the terminal, and he had begun to smile. He was happy and surprised. Glancing over the faces, he recognized only a few. Yet here were 50 people receiving him and chanting Hare Krishna without his having said a word. Mukunda, We just had a look at Swamiji, and then we bowed down. Myself, my wife, and the friends I had brought, Sam and Marjorie, means Shamsunda and Malati. And then all of the young men and women there followed suit and all bowed down to Swamiji, just feeling very confident that it was the right and proper thing to do. The crowd of hippies had formed a line on either side of a narrow passage through which Swamiji would walk. As he passed among his new admirers, dozens of hands stretched out to offer him flowers and incense. He smiled, collecting the offerings in his hands, while Rancho looked on. Allen Ginsberg stepped forward with a large bouquet of flowers, and Srila Prabhupada graciously accepted it. Then Prabhupada began offering the gifts back to all who reached out to receive them. He proceeded through the terminal, the crowd of young people walking beside him, chanting. Yeah, so that scene, we will definitely read more about it. Quite a bit. But in San Francisco, there was a famous song, very famous song back at that time, called If You're Going to San Francisco. That's pre your time. That was 65 or 6. If you're going to San Francisco, be sure to wear some flowers in your hair. On the streets of San Francisco, what is it? Summertime will be a lovin' there. Something like that. It was really a popular song, and I still remember it 50-something years later. Oh yeah, it was another world. And there was a whole lot of optimism, but it didn't take long before the optimism just got burnt out. Because it's hard to be optimistic when you're living in the streets, literally on the actual street. So it didn't take long to fall to pieces, sure. Okay, so here we go. At the baggage claim, Srila Prabhupada waited for a moment, his eyes taking in everyone around him. Lifting his open palms, he beckoned everyone to chant louder, and the group burst into renewed chanting, with Prabhupada standing in their midst, softly clapping his hands and singing Hare Krishna. Gracefully, he then raised his arms above his head and began to dance, stepping and swaying from side to side. To the mixed chagrin, amusement, and irresistible joy of the airport workers and passengers, the reception party stayed with Prabhupada until he got his luggage. Then they escorted him outside into the sunlight and into a waiting car, a black 1949 Cadillac Fleetwood. Because this is 67, so the car's almost 20 years old. It's, and cars, they don't weather so well. And this is Cadillac, which is generally the top American car, and the Fleetwood is the biggest of the Cadillac range. Really a big car, big hefty car. Prabhupada got into the back seat with Mukunda and Allen Ginsberg until the moment the until the moment the car pulled away from the curb. Srila Prabhupada, still smiling, continued handing flowers to all those who had come to welcome him as he brought Krishna consciousness west. The Cadillac belonged to Harvey Cohen, who almost a year before had allowed Prabhupada to stay in his Bowery loft. Harvey was driving, but because of his chauffeur's hat, picked up at a Salvation Army store. And his black suit and his beard, Prabhupada didn't recognize him. "Where is Harvey?" Prabhupada asked. "He's driving," Mukunda said. "Oh, is that you? I didn't recognize you." Harvey smiled. "Welcome to San Francisco, Swamiji." Srila Prabhupada was happy to be in another big Western city on behalf of his spiritual master, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati and Lord Caitanya. The further west one goes, Lord Caitanya had said, the more materialistic the people. Yet, Lord Caitanya had also said that Krishna consciousness should spread all over the world. Prabhupada's godbrothers had often wondered about Lord Chaitanya's statement that one day the name of Krishna would be sung in every town and village. Perhaps that verse should be taken symbolically, they said. Otherwise, what could it mean? Krishna in every town? Yes, some of them thought it meant that in every town and village just meant all over India, as far west as the boundary of Gujarat province with Pakistan or something. But it was just inconceivable to them, to the actual Western world, and particularly people like the hippies, or particularly any Westerners. They're just in another world altogether. And the hippies were even in a further away world. But Srila Prabhupada had deep faith in that statement by Lord Caitanya and in the instruction of spiritual master. Here he was in the far western city of San Francisco, and already people were chanting. They had enthusiastically received him with flowers and kirtan. And all over the world there were other cities, much like this one. The temple Mukunda and his friends had obtained was on Frederick Street in the Haight-Ashbury district. Haight-Ashbury, that was the hippie district. Like the temple at 26 2nd Avenue in New York, it was a small storefront with a display window facing the street. A sign over the window read, Sri Sri Radha Krishna Temple. Mukunda and his friends had also rented a 3-room apartment for Swamiji on the 3rd floor of the adjoining building. It was a small, bare, run-down apartment facing the street. Followed by several carloads of devotees and curious seekers, Srila Prabhupada arrived at 518 Frederick Street and entered the storefront, which was decorated only by a few Madras cloths on the wall. Taking his seat on a cushion, he led a kirtan and then spoke, inviting everyone to take up Krishna consciousness. After his lecture, he left the storefront and walked next door and up the 2 flights of stairs to his apartment. As he entered his apartment, number 32, he was followed not only by his devotees and admirers, but also by reporters from San Francisco's main newspapers, the Chronicle and the Examiner. While some devotees cooked his lunch and Ranshaw unpacked his suitcase, Swamiji talked with the reporters who sat on the floor, taking notes on their pads. Reporter: downstairs, you said you were inviting everyone to Krishna consciousness. Does that include the Haight-Ashbury bohemians and beatniks? Prabhupada: yes, everyone, including you, or anyone else, be he or she what is called an acid head or a hippie or something else. Prabhupada's using the jargon a bit. But once he's accepted for training, he becomes something else from what he had been before. Reporter: what does one have to do to become a member of your movement? Prabhupada: there are 4 prerequisites. I do not allow my students to keep girlfriends. I prohibit all kinds of intoxicants, including coffee, tea, and cigarettes. I prohibit meat eating, and I prohibit my students from taking part in gambling. Reporter: do these shall not commandments extend to the use of LSD, marijuana, and other narcotics? Prabhupada: I consider LSD to be an intoxicant. I do not allow any one of my students to use that or any intoxicant. I train my students to rise early in the morning, to take a bath early in the day, and to attend prayer meetings 3 times a day. Our sect is one of austerity. It is the science of God. Although Prabhupada had found that reporters generally did not report his philosophy, he took the opportunity to preach Krishna consciousness. Even if the reporters didn't want to delve into the philosophy, his followers did. The big mistake of modern civilization, Srila Prabhupada continued, is to encroach upon others' property as though it were one's own. This creates an unnatural disturbance. God is the ultimate proprietor of everything in the universe. When people know that God is the ultimate proprietor, the best friend of all living entities, and the object of all offerings and sacrifices, then there'll be peace. That's the peace formula from chapter 5. The reporters asked him about his background, and he told briefly about his coming from India and beginning in New York. After the reporters left, Prabhupada continued speaking to the young people in his room. Mukunda, who had allowed his hair and beard to grow, but who wore around his neck the strand of large red beads Swamiji had given him at initiation, introduced some of his friends and explained that they were all living together and that they wanted to help Swamiji present Krishna consciousness to the young people of San Francisco. Mukunda's wife, Janaki, asked Swamiji about his plane ride. He said it had been pleasant, except for some pressure in his ears. The houses looked like matchboxes, he said. And with his thumb and forefinger, he indicated the size of a matchbox. He leaned back against the wall and took off the garlands he'd received that day until only a beaded necklace, a common, inexpensive item with a small bell on it, remained hanging around his neck. Prabhupada held it, inspected the workmanship, and toyed with it. This is special, he said, looking up, because it was made with devotion. He continued to pay attention to the necklace as if receiving it had been one of the most important events of the day. When his lunch arrived, he distributed some to everyone, and then Ranchor, efficiently though tactlessly, asked everyone to leave and give the Swami a little time to eat and rest. Outside the apartment and in the storefront below, the talk was of Swamiji. No one had been disappointed. Everything Mukunda had been telling them about him was true. They particularly enjoyed how he had talked about seeing everything from Krishna's viewpoint. That night on television, Swamiji's arrival was covered on the 11 o'clock news, and the next day it appeared in the newspapers. The Examiner's story was on page 2. Swami invites the hippies, along with a photo of the temple filled with followers and some shots of Swamiji, who looked very grave. Prabhupada had Mukunda read the article aloud. The lanky master of the faith, Mukunda read, attired in a flowing ankle-long robe and sitting cross-legged on a big mattress. Swamiji interrupted, "What is this word, lanky?" Mukunda explained that it meant tall and slender. I don't know why they said that, he added. Maybe it's because you sit so straight and tall, so they think that you're very tall. The article went on to describe many of the airport greeters as being, quote unquote, of the long-haired, bearded, and sandaled set. San Francisco's largest paper, The Chronicle, also ran an article titled, "Swami in Hippie Land, Holy Man Opens San Francisco Temple." The article began, "A holy man from India, described by his friend and beat poet Allen Ginsberg as one of the more conservative leaders of his faith, launched a kind of evangelistic effort yesterday in the heart of San Francisco's hippie haven." Srila Prabhupada objected to being called conservative. He was indignant. Conservative? How's that? Mukunda suggested, in respect to sex and drugs. Of course we're conservative in that sense, Prabhupada said. That simply means we're following Shastra. We cannot depart from Bhagavad Gita. But conservative we are not. Caitanya Mahaprabhu was so strict that he would not even look on a woman. But we're accepting everyone into this movement, regardless of sex, caste, position, or whatever. Everyone is invited to come chant Hare Krishna. This is Caitanya Mahaprabhu's munificence, his liberality. No, we are not conservative. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.